time now for Coming In Hot with Brent Wallace and former Ottawa Senator Jason York.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the show. Brent Wallace alongside Jason York. You know what? Let's get right to it. We're going to welcome in Shawn Simpson because
we already started the show. We already started the show backstage.
Yeah, we need about 5 minutes of out clips there.
Yeah, I threw out the nerd report listening to you two talk. So I don't know where the show is going to end up today. But Simmer, it's good to see you. A man of the little people. Always playing with a big heart.
Well, I'm coming in heavy today, but if my fitness program continues along, I'll be a bit lighter by the end of the summer. But good to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you, Simmer. By the way, we got to figure out how to get video and songs, because Simmer's come-in music here has to be another brick in the wall. Hey, Simmer, leave those kids alone.
Oh, I need to. I was doing some spray painting yesterday outside, so maybe another time I'll have to do the Pink Floyd graffiti on the background.
Right?
Seriously, Yorkie, overnight I was thinking the same thing. I thought, all in all, it's just another brick in the wall.
Oh God, I'm so happy I got somebody to throw back and forth our love of pop culture, music, all things 80s.
Or even the inability for Wally for us to ever have a topic that we actually finish off. He might be in a straitjacket by the end of the show.
Just so we're clear, Yorkie, have you been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Of course I have.
If you've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you will see the ginormous Pink Floyd display they have there. I'm well aware of the whole Pink Floyd situation. Okay,
you're well aware.
Yeah,
good. Thank goodness. So you are a music guy.
But I used to. Never mind. We're just going to move on. One thing I will say though, it makes more sense for Simmer to have the bricks in the background being a goalie. I believe that's what he's trying to get at.
I wish that I really did need that, you know. And I must admit, watching the Sens goaltenders the last couple of years has made me feel good about myself, because very few people avoided the puck as well as I did. But I've never seen a team go back to back. And one thing I love my goalies to do is catch the ice hockey puck. Have there been two guys in the history of the game with worse gloves than Murray and Korpisalo? Oh my God.
Simmer sells himself short though, because Simmer and I, for a very small window, played junior hockey against each other. Simmer was in the Sioux, I was in Hamilton. We both had batshit crazy coaches back then. But Simmer, you were a second round draft pick, weren't you?
Well, technically now, Yorkie, yes. This is where it has to be altered. In the 21 team NHL, I was a third round pick, and I always tell the famous story of being drafted. And Larry Kelly got me the worst seats because my parents were divorced. So by the time I got to the draft floor, another goalie had been drafted, Jimmy Rivnak. I'm like, who the hell are you? And so Brian Murray had the famous line, "You already lost faith in Simpson." But yeah, I peaked in junior. I must admit, I had a good junior career. Something really went well one year, and then after that, all bets were off. So I can't say there's the Boulin wall behind me. A good old basement action here.
I just by the topic of music here, Wally, I figured out one more fictional movie character that you remind me of. The girl's father from Footloose that tries to ban the music, tries to ban dancing.
I think Yorkie would be Kevin Bacon on the tractor playing chicken. Me and Yorkie going head to head. Kevin Bacon, very very underrated actor right there.
Oh, great actor, great actor.
The movie, I'll never remember. The one with Tom Cruise is a lawyer and Kevin Bacon's the other lawyer in it. A Few Good Men.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was. I thought he was fantastic.
Another one, and I'm terrible. I'm always terrible with the titles, but the one with Tim Robbins and Sean Penn, based in The Abduct Your Child out of Boston, that was a powerful movie. Yes. My jumping jeepers, was that a good one? But Kevin Bacon, and also we were just talking about the music, and we're not. I mean, I'm older than you guys, but that's really the whole much music, right? I mean, the Pink Floyd thing and all the memories of those videos that first came out. Quiet Riot, the guy with the long hair. Hey, yeah, come on, feel the noise. Yeah, and then
Twisted Sister.
Twisted Sister was the big one. That's Wally, the military dad, and then there's his son upstairs jamming on the guitar.
Have you listened to their Christmas album?
No, and he's Jewish too. I love it. Eh? him and Neil Diamond. I find it so ironic that they have Christmas albums.
Well, listen. Well, you're like this, Simmer, because later on the show we're going to have some trivia for you of the fictional characters that Wally reminds us all of. So
I've heard all the salty stuff. So
this will be later on in the show. We'll have some characters, and we'll have a little poll going on who we think Wally is.
All right.
Let's get to the nerd report, shall we?
Okay.
Throw that in the garbage.
We have lots to talk about. I don't even know where you want to begin. There's the World Championships. We saw Canada fall to 4th, losing to Sweden with the Czechia winning gold. We got the Rangers up 2-1. We got the Oilers play tonight. The Trouba elbow. Philip Hronik still not talking to anybody. There's lots of things going on. Where do you want to begin?
I don't know. The world.
By the way, Dominic Kubalik's a world champion.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Like the World Championships is nobody really watches anyhow, but it's always interesting. It's like really, who really cares?
Listen,
the playoffs.
Hold on a second. I disagree with you. When you say nobody really watches, you can talk North America because it's big.
Okay, within my friend group, we're not on the golf course right now saying, "Hey, did you see that World Championship game last night? That was good."
The game started at 8 a.m. You're not even
like when we're deciding when we're going to go for a beer at night. We're not deciding on, hey, we got to go pick up this Switzerland-Canada game tonight. It's going to be a good one.
Did you PVR that so we can end up watching it? Here's my thing. I'm the late great Jack Button, who was my mentor, got sick in the mid-90s with cancer. So in 1996, I went to the World Championships in Vienna. And previous to that, you saw the odd Canada thing. I think the Robitaille Ranford was just before that when Canada won. But when I went over there, man, I fell in love with it. And I think Wally'd feel the same way. And Yorkie, did you play one year?
I was invited twice. I was, when you're playing in the NHL, you're so stupid.
Yeah.
I was a UFA, so I couldn't go. My agent,
Okay.
Pat Morris said, "Don't go. You're going to get hurt." And anyhow, didn't go. Would have loved to have gone. But I listen, when you're there, it is awesome. It's a great. I played in the Spengler Simmer, which was also phenomenal. But let's be honest, nobody cares unless you're there.
Well, in North America, but the point being, and I try to explain this to people all the time, this World Cup of hockey means nothing to anybody. Like, I went to the one in 96 and it was awesome. The Canada-United States, which is a final you have to have now. Over in Europe, the World Championships is huge. And if you want to grow the game, which we really should be thinking about, the return of the Czech Republic or Czechia is so important. As you know, Yorkie coming through, like the amount of players they produce, that couldn't have been a better outcome. And then I think also the part I saw yesterday, and not that I watched it, but we're not conditioned to win bronze medals. Sweden and Finland, Finland always squeezes it out. And now our Canadian guys come back with a great tournament. You got nothing to show for it, but there could have been a better result yesterday. It's so important that Czech, Slovaks, like we don't have many hockey countries now. You take Russia out of the mix of the World Championships, guys. What the hell do you have left?
Switzerland in the final. That's what.
And which is awesome. I look big picture.
It's great.
I think it's awesome, but they're usually an 8th place team. Like they used to be an 8th placer.
I had no idea. Fiala was Swiss. That one. I had no idea. No, so it shows how much I'm paying attention to international hockey. But
any of the Swiss or Austrian guys, Yorkie, I think you always have to look it up, right? Because even Thomas Vanek, and then you go through different guys. So you don't have any expectation. You usually think they were born somewhere and they went to the Czech Republic or Sweden to train. Almost like Kopitar ended up doing.
Yeah. So how about Kubalik? Goes over there, lights it up again. I looked at his stats, so he did sneak in 11 goals in this season, but like, listen, terrible season. But how many did you get overseas? What did you get? In the
5 goals, 8 points, plus 5 in 10 games.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, I think if you also go through, guys, a few things from a Sens perspective. I mean, let's be realistic. Like when guys are told that they're traded to Ottawa, I think the culture's really changed, and I think it will change. But I still think it takes time. When that phone call comes, that all of a sudden you've been moved. Where's your mindset? Then you come in, how are you being used? And then the thing with him, he's a shooter. And that's one of the things that Sens have really lacked down the middle is that, when you look at Norris, although not healthy, but Pinto, Stützle's pretty good. But overall, they don't have those playmaking centers. Like they've got a lot of goal scorers, but they don't have, this guy needs to be set up. And then the other part, and as you guys know, like when you go and play for your home country and you're playing in Czechia, man, oh man, you're just elevated, the excitement there. And let's also face facts. I mean, this is a heavily scouted tournament. This is an unrestricted free agent. He's probably paved his way after the tournament back into a contract, which was probably not touch and go, but he's put himself in a pretty good spot. So I think he was very aware of that.
How happy was he when he first got traded, and how long did that last until they got Tarasenko? I'm going to Ottawa. I'm going to be a top 6 forward. And I'm going to be a free agent. I'm going to get 3. Oh shit! They just got Tarasenko.
Yeah, I'm going to be the shooter on the power play. To all of a sudden, hey, is there a third unit here? Maybe if there's a 5-minute major, I might see a little bit of action. And then how many times did he whiff on one-timers this year? Like he just never seemed to get comfortable, And then he, that was his thing in Chicago. There's a reason why they didn't give him a qualifying offer. That's his forte. He's not a physical player. You don't notice him a lot. I mean, he's basically a shooter, and I think he's a capable player. I thought in training camp the guy was going to have a great year.
And how about this too? It's like, okay, that's his spot on the left side, 1T. Norris starts the year. That's Norris's spot. And all of a sudden, they get rid of Tarasenko. Norris is hurt. There's a month or so left in the season, and you can see Kubalik's just licking his chops. Oh, Ottawa's going to be now the only team that puts 2D there, and now Chychrun's going to take that spot.
No, I know. Yeah.
He had a bad year, Kubalik, but
yeah,
did he ever really get a long opportunity to be that shooter on the part? No, because to your point, they had eight shooters on this team last year, and a couple of defensemen that were shooters too. So it was just it's unfortunate because that trade is just such a bad trade. It's such an awful trade, and you ended up getting when you made that trade and they said, "Oh, we're going to give you Kubalik." I would have rather said, give me one of your third or fourth liners, at least a guy that's going to help us, not another goal scorer that doesn't really play defense.
How about somebody with some term? Like honestly, and this is the whole problem, and I'm not going to go rehash the past, but these trades that were made, and I said at the time, okay, the DeBrincat thing is super sexy. It's awesome. Isn't this unbelievable? Okay, have you talked to the agent? Have you talked to the player? Do you know that he wants to stay here long term? And then basically you turn the 7th pick overall to one of the late round. Now you got a late round, first round pick. Now, do you get a Pinto? Do you get a Greg? Who knows? But yeah, no, I mean, the roll of the dice basically, guys, let's see how Chychrun turns out. But 3 years in a row in a rebuild of giving up that pick, giving up Chychrun, and then the Boucher one. I know the injuries have been bad, guys, but let's face facts here. He was never supposed to be a 10th pick overall. 3 years in a row, 7, 10, and 12. That's not what you need in the middle of a rebuild, man. Those are assets that should be coming through your system right now.
Yeah. What a dark hole, those few years. Wouldn't you just, Simmer, you were in management for a while. I'm going to get one of my players. Hey, Brady, I'm going to give this DeBrincat a call and just see if he'll sign with us. It's pretty easy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the back channel stuff that's done now, there was no feel to this. Now, fine line of going to players and asking about other players because you don't know. You have to know. But in the case of Brady Tkachuk, that's your captain. First of all, you have that back and forth, Wally, but you also have a trust factor where he'd be the one guy I'd go to. I wouldn't go to anybody else. Wouldn't matter if a guy played with DeBrincat. It would be the one guy I would trust and say, hey, you're part of the process here. We got to keep this quiet. Make sure your dad doesn't call him as well. But because that's double tampering because he works for the Blues. But no, no, but absolutely, you start feeling it out. I mean, that happens all the time.
All the time. Oh God.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I don't think the player is based on, maybe it's telephones, Yorkie, but I think my first year in the Sioux, Wally wants to talk. I think of my first year in the Sioux, I was homesick and I went to say hi to Mike Dagenet, who was playing for Peterborough, and I gave him a hug. I came back and the trainer, Marc Desjardins, just gave it to me. You don't ever talk to the other team's players.
Yeah, not allowed. Wally's got steam coming. We've got a set schedule here. It must be adjourned.
No, I meant to say off the top that I wanted to at least say my name at the beginning because this is the last time you'll hear from me in this episode.
You need to start doing emojis above your head.
I'm just going to speak to the players or the people in the chat. You guys have your own notes.
You just start doing you got to get the devil horns coming out.
It's okay. I'm enjoying this. I'm just gonna hey, I'm good. But I just I don't know if I sent it to Gavin in time, but I just sent over like the picks they have made, first round picks over the last 10 years is, and you guys talk about the players they didn't have. Lassie Thompson again, right? I don't know what's going to ever become a Lassie Thompson, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's not here this year. Like that's your list of first round picks, the last 10 picks, I think it is last 9 picks. Yeah. Like Shane Bowers traded. He's only played, I think, 4 NHL games as it is. So, I mean, but I will say the one thing is, and we always say this, is Ottawa's farm team is struggling to have star players. Well, if you look at that group, that's because a lot of them are currently playing in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, you know, if you go, Yorkie, if you go through the drafting, again, you can pick apart, God, the years I worked, and you go through it, but also just be thankful. If I was starting a franchise and you said I could have Tkachuk, Stützle, and Sanderson, you know what? When how many teams have gone through rebuilds, like Edmonton for years, Chicago, remember Pittsburgh, they have nothing. Now, I know there's misses here. I'll give credit that Bowers is included in the Norris deal. So Norris, you know, they're okay, the little recovery. But starting with Logan Brown, certainly, and I'm not sold completely on JBD as far as a long-term thing. And Lassie Thompson, he's one of those guys I think may go to Europe for 2 or 3 years, maybe matures physically. Yorkie, you're the D-man. He looked like mentally that was his biggest issue. The minute he made his mistake, he disappeared. I think Anaheim kind of got word of that. So I agree with you. And just fortifying the system. But they did push a lot of players through. And they still, to me, have a core based on the drafting. My side of a Yorkie has always been, had they ever hit on any trades, I mean, Mark Stone to Duchesne, like, I mean, we can, Mika Zibanejad, like, you can go through here, guys. Well, if you hit on 2 or 3 of those trades right now, where would you be at as an organization? Because there is a nice core here.
But let's go. Okay, I just want to take the one Zibanejad deal, and that's because people look back and see Derek Brassard brought a veteran element to a team that helped get them to an Eastern Conference final, and people weren't sure if Mika was going to be able to turn his career into what it is now. But there's no question he was a talented hockey player.
Really talented. I don't think I think though, when I watched DJ Zbad play, I don't think you can build your team around him. So if Ottawa would have had to keep him and make him the central piece of your team and overpay him, I don't think I'd like where Ottawa is. To me, if you look at New York, their leaders are Kreider, they're Trocheck, they're Panarin.
Yeah.
Zbad can't lead your team. So that one doesn't, I just wish they would have got a little bit better in return for him because, you know, he was a high pick, but I think it would have been a mistake to keep him and build around him.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Yorkie. Here would have been the perfect scenario because when I first came back in 2011, you were set up with Spezza, you made the amazing tourist trade, and then you had Zbad in the 3 spot. I think in a perfect world, even when you watch the playoffs and the Rangers are coming along, but I mean, he's more of a power play guy. I mean, even to some extent, I'll argue that with Panarin. Like he's a guy that, as you know, I watch some of these games now, he's hard to find. And also with Mika Zibanejad, and this was always the rule, 25 and under. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of players that need a change of scenery. But at the end of the day, I need the other team's player that needs a change of scenery. I don't need to give up Derek Brassard or Zibanejad in a 2nd round pick. And the idea that Brassard, now he was better than Burrows. There's no doubt about it. But the idea that addition, all of a sudden, that playoff run was Craig Anderson, Bobby Ryan elevated. It was smoke and mirrors. I mean, it was really just, it was lightning in a bottle. And this idea that all of a sudden all these sum of parts, well, the following year we saw what it was all about. But I agree with you on Mika, like in a perfect world. But I think the Sens had that to nurture him. But at the same time, you know what? It was 2 years where Gerard Gallant and I'm trying to think of who else were kicking it. Alain Vigneault. I mean, he called out Kreider and Zibanejad all the time. Said they made her make a decision, and it clicked in. But it was some tough love in New York too. It wasn't like all of a sudden he just went there and was rocking and rolling.
Yeah, the Rangers are. I don't know if you guys have watched a lot of the Rangers series.
Yeah,
it's crazy how they win. They get outplayed for vast majorities. Well, Shesterkin. Like look at the goalies right now. You got Shesterkin, you got Bob.
Yeah.
It's almost like they play rope-a-dope, the Rangers. They'll go to sleep, they'll wake up, Shesterkin will get going, the MSG crowd will get going, but they're a funny team to watch play because you're right. Like Panarin, he'll go to sleep for parts of the game, then all of a sudden power play comes, he'll score. Same with Mika. I really like Trocheck.
Oh, geez,
To me, those types of guys, and that's the difference with good pro scouting, right? You can identify a guy on a team like a Trocheck that has all those intangibles you like. And it's same with Vancouver. Like we talked about Vancouver. Everybody used to think they were going to win because of Elias Peterson. No. It's these other guys that Talk gets identified, right? These guys, these heart and Simmer in the playoffs. It's your third line that wins for you and your goaltender every single year. And full circle to the Sens. When the Sens go to make their moves, I would love to see them bring in some heart and soul veterans to surround this young core with.
Yeah, from my young scouting career to going, like the whole formation of what changed the face of hockey teams was a formation of Bobby Holik with McKay and Peluso. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if Detroit took that game plan, but all of a sudden they went a little smaller, but they went to Maltby, Draper, and McCarty. And that changed the whole face of the franchise. They weren't fighters, but it changed the tempo of the game. And I think back to when St. Louis won, it was actually that fourth line. And of all players, it was Steen, Sundqvist, and I can't remember, Barbashev. Like these were guys that were completely out of their role. That forecheck that they laid on Boston was lethal. I mean, the poor defenseman didn't want any part of it. So yeah, there's the layers to it. And as far as the Rangers, here's what happened. They should have lost the series to Carolina. Good old Freddie Anderson, that second goal in that game 6 is a classic. It's a classic Freddie Anderson. They had no sniff. That should have went to a game 7. They gave him some life. But I think that Carolina, to be quite honest with you, and we're seeing it with all the teams, guys. Of course, I put out the great tweet yesterday that scoring's at a premium. And of course, we have a 5-4 game, but that's what you end up doing. But the teams are tired right now. But this is the Rangers that we've seen a lot of years. That third round, their energy level, even this Kempe, he's flying around. He's got nothing. By the time he reaches to hit somebody, the only thing he can do is hit guys from behind. Everybody's out of gas. Even watch McDavid off the rush now, Yorkie. Like you watch him now.
He looks human. He does.
He really does. He really does. Like the energy, you just can't do it right now. And special teams, that's where the Rangers, special teams and goaltending, that's going to carry them if they're going to keep on.
You ever notice with McDavid, and he's awesome, when you get him stationary compared to when you get Leon's, like Leon standing still can still make plays. Connor has to be moving all the time just because he's got the smaller legs, the smaller ass. But man, how about playoff Leon though? Playoff Leon is, I don't know if there's anybody better. Like just an absolute mutant out there.
Yeah, it reminds you of a combo of Malkin, somewhere between Malkin and Lemieux. That bigger body, the big blade, all
great
this stuff.
Comparison.
And McDavid, I'm watching 2 nights ago, off the rush, he's trying to do the 1-on-5. And the speed's not there, and he's not the biggest guy in the world, and he's still world class. And you get him with open ice, but I don't know right now. He's not going to do the end-to-end. He's not doing the Mario right now, and that becomes a real problem. Dallas is playing him tight. Yeah, probably. I mean, everybody is, and he's worn down, right? Yeah.
But that's a good comparison. That's a good comparison, though. Yeah, you take a little bit of Mario. You got a little bit of Jagger in there too, like just the way he kind of slows it down. But he's something else. What do you got for us, Wally?
I'm here just to read the ads today. Okay. We're going to move. So Yorkie, you've been talking since last week about talking possible players who could fit into Ottawa's system, upcoming UFAs. Then I tell Simmer, and after Yorkie, you sent me like 10 people. Simmer sent me another 15 or 20. So we're basically going to go through the entire list of UFAs available this season. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That'll be in a 3-part series coming up.
Everybody's got their draft packages out. We're going to be one step ahead of them. We're going right to unrestricted free agency. Then they can watch it all summer. This will be that'll be a show that lasts until at least end of July.
We need content. We need content.
We're going to break down every player available for all 7 rounds of the draft. All right, this show proudly.
You know what? One thing, Wally, though, I'll tell you what. My coffee will still be hot 2 months from now in this Yeti cup. It's unbelievable.
Mine is not, and I'm just in a typical cup I got in Zurich, Switzerland. Speaking of the bronze medalists. All right, this show proudly presented by Betway. Bet your way with Betway. Please play responsibly. You must be 19 plus. Don't forget, we'll be back later in the show for our lock of the day, which is obviously tonight's Western Conference final. We'll even get Simmer's pick on the game. Also, by BEI, our good friends at Bonisher Excavating Inc., helping to shape the Ottawa Valley as always, which includes brand new driveways if you're looking to do one or a reseal. Give them a call if you need equipment rentals, aggregate topsoil sales, also the hot mix paving as well. They can get your curb appeal sparkling this year. Give them a call, 613-432-1120 or BonisherExcavating.com. Remember, Yorkie, Slow down in construction zones.
Yep. Take your time.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, by Wendy's. Frozen pucks are awesome when they're in the back of the other guy's net, but that doesn't mean you'd want to eat one. That's why Wendy's only uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of a freezer in all of their juicy burgers. Whether you order a Baconator, Dave Single, or a JBC, you'll only ever find real fresh beef that's real juicy and loaded with fresh toppings. So download the Wendy's app, check out the latest deals, order a burger that's only job is being delicious. Okay, gentlemen. Speaking of delicious, Yorkie's list of possible UFAs. Do we even start with Linus Ullmark, who's not a UFA, or do we leave him till the end?
Well, that's a trade candidate, so it's not really.
Okay, we'll leave him till the end. Well, but listen. If they got Linus Ullmark, we could probably just settle on some other players we don't need necessarily as important because they have Linus Ullmark. But we can get to him later.
Simmer, I don't know about you, but I'd be kind of not worried. But you bring Ullmark in, he plays in such a structured environment. He knows exactly where the DR, the guys are being taken. It's just, I was thinking about this over the weekend. It's like, why do goalies, when they leave Ottawa, make all-star teams? Why do goaltenders that were good come here and not play well? It's just, I would be a little nervous about bringing him in. I would be.
Yeah, here's the thing on Ullmark, I'll say, and this is where you, as you pointed out, have to be really careful. And it was really kind of shown in the Toronto series, guys. He is not Jeremy Swayman. And when I talk about the Bobrovsky and I talk about Jeremy Swayman and Shesterkin, these are guys that athletically can go from their butterfly and make a second save. They're basically SpongeBob or whatever the hell the guy that could contort himself all over the place. Ullmark is an excellent athlete, and he's an excellent first save goaltender. Now, the only thing I'll say to that, Yorkie, is that, and this is probably Bob Essenza, it's probably structures, probably everything else. His numbers on a very terrible Buffalo team were actually pretty darn good. And that's the part I will say. Now, with him, I think it's a combination of that. Yeah, anybody with Ottawa right now, he's not Shesterkin, so he's not coming to save the day. Do I think he's an upgrade on what they have? Absolutely. But you have to sort out, does the guy want to be here? Secondly, do you want to get some term on the contract? Is he an upgrade? Is he an option? Absolutely. But to your point, yeah, absolutely. Like, don't expect him to come in and all of a sudden, it's 45 saves a night. No, you're going to have to be better in front of him. We can talk about the free agency and solidifying the D. But I don't disagree, like I said. But I will go back to those Buffalo numbers when I was really surprised, because when they made the trade, I was kind of like, or when they brought him over as a free agent, they gave him the big contract. I was like, what the hell is this? And then when you really looked at his numbers in Buffalo, I was like, wow, pretty good save percentage. I think an over 500 goaltender on a real bad hockey team. So as I said, major upgrade. But to solidify your point, yeah, again, don't expect him to be one of those top guys in the National Hockey League, because Boston, they're the old Ken Hitchcock in St. Louis. What Butchie's done and what Monty's done. They have an excellent system in front of their goaltenders.
How many lives? Like Bob Essenza, I actually played with in Detroit.
Okay. And that was a big trade.
But Bobby came in. Tim Cheveldae was gone. Bobby shows up. First order of business back and then too. He brings a case of beer for us for the room. Like what a great guy. So, but since I was in Boston in 2007, Essenza's been in Boston since 2007. That's a pretty long tenure for a goalie coach. And their goalies have been pretty darn good over the years. So that guy has done a tremendous job there. And you go from Tim Thomas, and of course I was legendarily part of the Tuukka Rask. So from Rask and Thomas to Rask to now what they have now in Swayman, absolutely. And that's kind of like Allaire in New York. Allaire, I don't know if he has and he should be, and it's nothing against him. I mean, Dolan must know who this guy is, because everybody gets cleaned out from the president down, and they never fire the goalie coach. And that speaks to, he wasn't there for Richter, but certainly what he turned Lundqvist in. And now all of a sudden Shesterkin comes over. So it's so important. And let's be honest, too, from an Ottawa perspective, I'm not going to put anything on the goaltender coaches because I don't know them well enough. But this has been a long trail here since Craig Anderson of who's part of identifying this. Like, to me, you should have a department of goaltending, department of defense, department. I'd have one of those guys on my pro staff, my amateur staff, because I'll be honest with you, from a scouting perspective, I find defensemen the hardest to identify, because here's a few things. And you went back to talking about Kubalik, situational.
I mean, I've seen defensemen in situations like Larry Murphy might be the greatest example of all time from Toronto to Detroit. They booed him out of town. And then he went and became a Hall of Famer. How you're used, where you're used, who you play with. I mean, Yorkie, you'd know that better than anybody else getting the chance from Detroit to Anaheim. You know, would you have been afforded that chance when you were there? Like you go in and play, and how are you used and what's the opportunity? Man, it's everything. And from an Ottawa perspective, the identifying of goaltenders has been, well, they've had 2 swings now since Anderson that are absolutely franchise altering. And unfortunately, because of the Korpisalo contract, that's even worse than Matt Murray.
Ooh. Best defense coach ever I had, by the way, probably Dave Lewis in Detroit. What a smart guy. He's the guy that got his hands on Lidstrom when he came over. And you look at the career Lidstrom had. Larry Murphy came to Toronto, all of a sudden turned things in around in Detroit. Common denominator, Dave Lewis there again. A smart guy. So calm too.
Yeah, and a little, we'll go off topic, Wally. I'll bring it back, I promise. But when I was in the KHL, Glennie Hanlon was our coach. Louis was the assistant coach. So first of all, not only awesome to be at the rink with, but he was there by himself just to hang out with him. And the stories, he has an awesome guy. And this always brings me back to, we had Tim Hunter coaching our defense in Washington. And Huntsy's a great guy, great coach, never played defense in his life. Randy Carlisle comes in and turns Sergei Gonchar, who was basically Thomas Chabot at the time, into an all-star defenseman, and he turned Joel Kwiatkowski, Jason Doig into serviceable players. And this is the part with Ottawa. When was the last time Ottawa had a former defenseman? I just don't understand this. Like, and I'm not saying it has to be an all-star, but Randy Carlisle came in. He taught Sergei Gonchar how to play, and now that's why Gonch could have never coached. Ottawa needs that so badly, and I know Nolan Baumgartner is a kid that I drafted, Wally, but man, oh man, like you come to the bench, Yorkie, I can't imagine talking to a guy that never played defense.
I would tell you guys this, because being in that situation, the defensemen, we're at the end of the bench by ourselves. There's the 6 of us there, and we're almost like a little tribe. We've got we have this little pack together. I say this all the time. We have a secret code, and the code is you never trust a forward. And we talk about that. You know, when you do your D forward splits, we go down to our end, we do our D drills. The forwards are down there. We used to take a goalie with us. Usually the backup goalie comes down. We have some fun. We do our drills. We make fun of the forwards. But this goes on all year. The D sit together in most dressing rooms. You sit together. Usually I roomed with my partner, Wade Redden, for 3 years, and you get a bond. You get a bond. And get the other thing too, like you need to play with the same partner over and over and over again. Like some coaches don't understand that, because you almost get a sixth sense of where your partner is going to be, where he likes his passes, what his voice sounds like. So when you call for a reverse, you don't get tricked by the forward coming in who calls you by your nickname. You go, I know that's not my partner, because that's what his voice sounds with. Versus you could be playing with maybe a Russian guy that doesn't even talk out there. So it's so Simmer. I agree. It's not everything, but it sure as hell helps when you have a guy back there that's been there, done that, knows it, and knows about that secret tribe that all defensemen you have together.
Yeah, go back to the word trust, guys. You know, Yorkie, that's the biggest thing. I mean, how do you trust? And I'll joke around about defensemen and this is what Thomas Chabot is. And we used to have a player, Sylvain Cote, where he would run around, he'd start a fire, and then he'd go to put one out. He'd go out and be trying to do too much. When you trust your partner, you're able to concentrate on your own thing. You solidify that. And that really go back to the history of Thomas Chabot. They had something going with DeMello. And I'm not putting it all on Thomas Chabot's got to be better. This whole Zaitsev thing. And then you go back to historically Ottawa. How important was, and again, say whatever you want about Kuba. He got the deal, went to Florida, was terrible. He was a great fit for Erik Karlsson. The Ottawa Senators reloaded, recognized, and said, listen, got to find a partner. They went out and made them thought trade, and that was just excellent. And it's not always, and hey, you don't know for sure, Lork. It's just like forwards. You don't know when you make a trade. Like amateur scouts will sit there and say, I think that guy can play with Oates, or he can play with Sundin, or hey, you have no idea. But you can try to do your best to think it's a compliment and stay with it. And that's what the Ottawa Senators need to do with a guy like Thomas Chabot. It's not just about, and it doesn't have to be the sexiest player. That's the great part. He's your sexy player. I got to go and find out a compliment. I'm going to go old school. Jeff Bookabum couldn't play in Edmonton. Comes in and plays with Brian Leach, and the rest is history.
They won a cup. They won a cup.
Yeah.
The list, Wally, the list.
So Jason Smith in 2015-16 is the last, as I can figure it out, D-man to be an assistant coach. And then before that, Luke Richardson. And then there's Brett. They had Brad Lauer. So there was a few guys. Donnie Jackson was a goalie, correct?
By the way, Wally, how good was Simmer? We had Luke on last week. He was just listening to his stories and how he sees the game, how he holds guys accountable, but how he's a good guy. Man, what a loss letting him go.
Oh, and again, and I'll say this, and I understand both sides of it. Dorian wouldn't even interview him for the job, but I'll say this as well. It's almost like what they went through in the NFL, where black coaches are being brought in because they've got to make a quota. Like, how bad do you feel? So from Luke's standpoint, I understand is that if you're not going to hire me, it's kind of a double-edged sword. But I didn't understand, because my development coach in the American Hockey League, I don't care if you go 0-82, he produced player after player. He's a hell of a coach. And then the other thing you can do is, if you bring him in for an interview, he doesn't get the job, you might be able to massage him into being an assistant coach and have him back. Yeah. But I go back to Luke Richardson, and this is the funniest thing. And I saw him at the rink about 6 months ago. Chris Finnerty, the skating coach, and he was crazy in the 80s. Well, who was in front of it? Luke Richardson and his dad. And you know what they also did? They got Chris Finnerty. He also made the decision as a minor midget not to play. I think he went and played West Ottawa Junior B, but they were so ahead of the curve. And then honestly, let's go back to, who doesn't wish Luke Richardson and his family and Stephanie anything but the best? And who is a better mentor of human beings than Luke Richardson? Nobody. And when you talk about teaching, putting your equipment on and going on, and here's the other part, Yorkie, and I'm sure you can attest to, the part of people think that when you get to the National Hockey League that you know what you're doing. The teaching should never end. And and I'm not just saying the Sens. I remember going to watch New Jersey. They'd have Larry Robinson, they'd have Chris Terreri, they'd have Bobby Carpenter. They'd break everybody up in Albany into groups, and they do teaching. They do the same thing at the NHL level. I can't believe I know the schedule's tough, but I love skill days. Why don't you do a teaching day? Why don't you actually go out and teach? And when Luke would throw the gear on, how cool is that as a player? Not to mention the guy's in world-class shape. So, God, oh God, I'm just so happy that Luke got that opportunity. It's absolutely awesome.
That's great.
People that don't know is your former teammate in the punch up in Piastani. So
we had it was funny that year we had him and Chris Joseph. As far as defensemen draftable, Jimmy Waite, Turgeon, Shanahan. Actually had a lot of young guys that ended up being drafted that year. That went on to obviously to play very well. Luke played right away with Toronto. Chris had a pretty good career for himself as well.
You brought up a name there, sorry, Wally, Chris Finnerty, and for people in hockey circles know who he is. Old school Ottawa people know who he is. I went to Chris when I was a kid. Wally, this guy was so ahead of his time. He'd throw a ton of people on the ice, all different skill levels, pucks. I remember I used to go there and I used to complain. I go, Mom, this guy makes me skip rope on the ice. I'm on the ice, I'm skipping rope in my skates, and I'm doing all this stuff. I'm stick handling 2 pucks. Now you got skills coaches that are doing all this stuff with players, but interesting. Chris actually grew up with my mother, Simmer.
Oh, okay, cool.
I actually think he had a crush on my mom growing up.
Oh, nice.
So, it's weird because I don't know. My mom's was 5'2", Chris is 6'2", I'm 6'2". I don't know.
You wondered why your lessons were all free. you know what? When I saw him, I swore he was Russian. And that's what I thought of. I thought, well, this guy is obviously, he was working with Tarasov and Tikhonov over in Russia, and then he came over. But it is sad. And that was when Dennis McDonald started bringing that stuff over with Hockey Canada. We were so far behind, and Chris was so far ahead of it. And you look back now, as you said, it's all the edges, it's all the teaching.
I'll tell you guys one more quick, funny Chris Finnerty story, because he's legendary for going around in rollerblades and skating through neighborhoods. So I was living out in rural Canada at the time, way out near Lockmarch Golf Course. And my kids, Jack and Matthew at the time, were 9 and 10. And I came home, they're like, Dad, this big, huge guy in cut-off jean shorts and no shirt off came skating by the driveway. And he said, "Hey, kids, can I play road hockey with you?" And so Finnerty, like I was living out in the sticks, and Finnerty roller skated by or roller bladed with a stick and tried to play some road hockey with my kids, but they were scared because
that can't be the same guy that can't be the same guy in Barhaven that skates around in the Speedo, is it?
Oh God, that's so funny.
All right, our friend Perry Lowe. In the comment section. This will just clarify or clean up our entire show. Perry says it's 9:30, but I'm taking a shot for each topic non-UFA list related. So
we should get to the list around high noon. So if you want to tune back in,
you'll have time for a nap and come back. Oh wait, so Yorkie, I'm going to let you pick the first player of the. I have 10 on my list of who you want to get to first.
I love the guy. I love that clip. It went viral with Jordan Martinek when he goes Svechnikov. Have you guys heard that one? It's so good. So everyone's talking about, because we could talk about the D. I know they need D. There's some guys out there, but I still think, and I've heard Staios talk about this, they need some character guys that can skate, have experience, play the right way, are not ancient as far as age goes. You don't want to bring a guy in that's like 34, 35, 36. But if you could find those guys that have played in the playoffs, they play hard. I just look at Jordan Martinek. He's a UFA this summer. To me, he checks a lot of boxes that Ottawa would be looking for. And I know, listen, when you play in Carolina, you usually never want to leave. You'll take a hometown discount. You'll stay there. Everybody loves it. The wives love it. They're set up pretty nicely. That is a guy that I think would look real nice in an Ottawa Senators uniform for a lot of those reasons and those support roles. And he's a good third liner that you get an injury, you could pop on the second line. You could play on your fourth line. I just think he'd be a great fit. He just does a lot of things, and he's been taught by Rod Brindamore to play the right way. He understands. He kills penalties for Carolina, one of the best penalty kill in the league. He would be a real nice support player for this group, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things I go back to, guys, when you look at, and I don't even know how you categorize Norris. I mean, I put a little circle around him where he's going to fit in. But the other thing everybody wants to do is if Norris is healthy, and say you slide him to the wing and have Pinto, everybody wants to throw all the top six forwards like DJ did on one line. You got to solidify, and everybody in the playoffs and anybody that's successful, start building some duos, start building the top nine. And I heard you talk last week, Yorkie, about a guy like Matthew Joseph. You know, Matthew Joseph, and again, I know he tailed off at the end of the year, but he showed me, a little bit when he first came over, and certainly the first half of last year. If you put him in the right spot, he could complement. I was a little surprised last year at the start of the year. He actually was making plays. He used to be activity and no achievement. There was some achievement, but back to your point on Martinek, basically what they need right now, if you take Norris out of the equation, they got 7 forwards for 9. They need to find, and what everyone wants to talk about, you're going to bring over, all these great players, and hey, okay, if you can pull off a major trade, great. Who's going back the other way? Be realistic, and they've got a fortify, and they haven't had. You could find a Martinek, and I know you mentioned Fogle on there, a couple of guys that are not going to be the sexiest guys. They really lost when they lost Nick Paul, although, okay, I'll give Joseph. But what Curtis Brown provided for the group that they had, guys, those 2 players could have moved around the lineup, and they would have been in pretty good shape. And to your point, that's exactly what you should be looking for. Because realistically, to me, what's on the shopping list? You need a number 1 goaltender. You're not making the playoffs. You need someone to complement Shabbat, or you're basically wasting what's going to be a $10 million defenseman. So these aren't going to be as sexy, but they're real important. Solidify the top 9, figure out some young players, a Kastelik or Ostapchuk and some other guys that could be fourth line for whatever it is. But I totally agree. Those are the smart signings, and that's exactly what Ottawa needs to identify right now.
You might have to give an extra year to entice them to come with some more money, but it's just that it's like we talked about earlier. You look at the good teams, their bottom 6 or their third line, they have guys like this. And Staios has talked about it many times. You've seen it hinting at. I think they're going to go shopping. I believe, or try and mix. And even if, depending what they do, the Trickren move, like it's going to free up some money. What happens with Norris? Is he healthy? There'll be a way to find some money.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, people in the chat are fantastic today. I'm having a chat with them more than you. They are excited. We got a name off the board. So let's keep it rolling. As we stay with the forwards, William Carrier.
Oh, well, you like him? See, the thing that Ottawa is he's not expensive. William Carrier is not. The only reason I put him on the list, again, if I'm another team, and I've heard this about Ottawa, they've become a very easy team to play against. And by easy is I always look at through a defenseman's lens. If I'm playing a team, I'll look at the lineup and I'll count the amount of guys in the forward group that are going to make me pay on the forecheck. And that's going to make me have to move the puck quicker. And Simmer, when you're in a locker room, what's the first game plan that your coach always says to you? We got to make it hard on the other team's D tonight. It's everything. It's like, you don't even have to have a team meeting. Okay, yeah, we know we have to make it hard on the other team's D.
Yeah.
If you look at Ottawa's forward group, besides Brady, who really scares you on the forecheck that's going to come in and finish you every single time? Like Vegas, they won a cup on just wearing teams down. But I like Carrier just because he would be a guy, and that's a pie in the sky type of thing. He's probably not leaving. He's probably going to go on their team. But that guy, he's always up there in hits. He makes you pay the price. He has won, and I just love it. It's another support player that, to me, is going to make this team tougher to play against.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he's also a player that, based on the depth that you end up having in Vegas, he starts on a fourth line. He only plays 10 minutes. But that's where you also have to identify. And it's some of the funny comments on guys' expectations. But when you look at Ottawa's group, well, first of all, if he's going to sign, his expectations would play in the top 9. He would be a foot soldier. He would be hard to play against. He'd identify all the things that you want to be if you're Ottawa. So, again, totally agree. And this is also, we'll get into the defenseman guys, but all these fantasy things, and we'll get into Pesci and other things, and you can scout all you want, but now you look situationally at American players and guy that's played in Carolina. Hey, this is Ottawa. They're rebuilding. There are a lot of positives going on. It's great ownership. It's also new management. Going to take a little time though. And as far as free agency, that's also where I'm realistic, guys, of more of, you might look to make soft deals. Like, it might be more realistic on soft deals to people of teams that with cap issues, because how many, honestly, free agents, when it comes to, and I don't care what the contract is, it's difficult for Ottawa right now. Now, can you end up signing guys? But you got to be careful, because what free agent is that? Is at the bottom of the pile where you're going to give too much term or money to, where there are soft deals, and Ottawa has not taken advantage of other teams being in cap trouble, where maybe you grab a guy that's about 2.5, bring him in for a couple of years. And I mean, the Connor Brown move was a great move as a throw-in at the time. I mean, it was exactly what you dream of when you're looking to, bring in that foot soldier that can move around, be an excellent penalty killer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I like those two guys too, because they're both under 30.
Yeah,
like I'm always scared when you bring in a guy that's mid-30s, because you're going to overpay, and the last 2 years you're going to be buying him out.
By the way, he is since he's joined the Knights, he is second on the team in hits, 1,115 hits, 6'2", 220. So he's got great size.
Plays heavy.
Not
plays heavy. Okay, third on the list, Warren Fogle. As we fly through these names, 6'2", 204. Averages 13 minutes of ice time. Got a career high in goals, assists, points this season. I like him.
Why do you like him, Wally?
I like his size. I like the speed. I like he's got a bite to him.
Yeah. He's got that redheaded power too. When you play with the redheads, they're always buzzing around there. They're tough to play against.
Connor Brown.
Right? They're a little crazy. They're a little crazy. What do you think about him, Simmer?
Well, again, same thing, guys. I'm looking to solidify my top 9. He can play in my top 9. When you go back to Ottawa a couple of years ago, they had nobody on the fourth line or third line that could even elevate. I need somebody that can move around. Can he complement other people? Is he in a situation? I'm not expecting Zach Hyman to come in, and obviously Ottawa doesn't have those players, but that would be, and the Norris thing is so tricky to plan around. What is he going to be? Where are you going to play him? I can't go out and spend the $8 million. And the other people talk about, well, you're going to flip him. Well, obviously that's not going to happen. And then you get into, quite simply, with him, you're cheering for him. I want him to do well. Can he recover as a young age and come back? But you're tagged to $8 million. What is he going to be as a hockey player? What value is he going to be to your team? But point being, if he's healthy, if you're projecting to do that, I need one more guy. And I'm confident that, if you're confident going into the year that based on Stützle, Pinto, Gregg, and say Kastelic is your 4, if that's what you're going to build around, find another winger that you can solidify your top 9 with. And any of those 3 guys would end up fitting that bill. Because realistically, internally, they don't have anybody coming through the system, and they don't have anybody on the roster right now that can move out of that fourth line role. So it's important, at least on paper, have a top 9. Now figure out what the combos and duos and trios are going to end up being.
You look at I was watching Fogle the other night when Edmonton locked down last series, and he's just buzzing around. He reminds me a little bit of Matthew Joseph, a little more skill. He got 20 goals this year, and everybody will say, well, why isn't he scoring in the playoffs that much? Well, Edmonton's the only team in the league that lets their first power play stay on for the entire 2 minutes. So, that's what always makes me laugh at Edmonton. Like, why come nobody else scores there? Well, because these guys, they take every offensive draw, McDavid, and why wouldn't you? McDavid, Draisaitl, and the Nuge and Hymans, they get all the looks all the time. Everybody else is out there to create energy. But Fogel's interesting because he's 28 years old. He's played over 70 playoff games already, and I love his speed. He's 6'2", and those are just three guys. Maybe like you're not going to get all three, but it's just to me, those are three guys like we've been talking about that would be real nice fits, and it could potentially be like a Matthew Joseph was to start the year. Fast,
yeah, and that's the pro scouting guys. And you go back again, like think of how crazy the Stepan move was. A second round pick. Like it was ridiculous. Like you had a guy right away that couldn't play, and then he gets injured. If you're scouts, and they've turned over the scouting staff, and I don't know, but I'm a big Dave Poulin guy, and he's pretty aware of what's going on. He's got a great network. Those simple things where you identify somebody, and I also, from an Edmonton perspective, have a conspiracy theory. They also put Zach Hyman on the power play for the full 2 minutes because they love that every time he scores, that goes back into the Toronto media. That's all anybody talks about is Zach Hyman and the Leafs letting him go. So that's also part of it. But again, this is where the small identification, you brought up Trocheck, these little moves that teams end up making. And I look at Bill Zito. I wasn't sure how Billy was going to do in Florida. And then I go through some of his moves initially, and even the Tkachuk one, I wasn't sure. And then I start to look at it's move after move after move that he hits on. Yeah. You're bringing in guys, and you're like, well, oh my God, where did Verhage? Where did you identify that? Who identified that player? Some of the defensemen that he had bring in. I mean, it has been absolutely incredible, and that's completely the difference of that drafted core in Florida where they're at comparison to where Ottawa's at.
So I used to do a bunch of games for Sportsnet, and I do the Calgary Flames, and they basically couldn't wait to get Sam Bennett out of town.
Yeah,
Florida. You look how important Sam Bennett is to that Florida Panthers identity, their culture.
Oh, man.
He knocked Marchand out of the last series. He plays hard. He is everything you want in a player on your team, and he's that much more important during the playoffs. Tough to find guys like that. He'll scratch your eyes out, do whatever he can, punch. Like basically, we all saw the play with Marchand. But man, it's hard to find those guys. But
and that was a real solid play, because even on the camera angle, it was hard to see what he was sneaking in. It's a little bit like the elbow last night. You don't really think it's really that big of a deal. And here's the other thing about Sam Bennett, Yorkie and Wally. This is the part of Canadian market. This is a part of being a super high pick. Couldn't do a chin up. Couldn't do anything. Ended up with injuries. Okay, now Sam Bennett. He doesn't care where he ends up going. He goes somewhere now. Nobody in Florida, first of all, they have no idea who I am, just another bald man in Florida. You go there, and all of a sudden you have a fresh lease on life. I can play greasy. I can do whatever I want. I'm brought in to be a role player. Nobody cares that I was a high pick, and I don't care anymore. I just want to contribute. And again, another thing about identifying, taking somebody out of a situation being used properly where he was never going to meet those expectations when he played in Calgary.
Somebody chirped him. There's a clip on the ice. It's one of those things where the players were mic'd, and they chirped him about being bald, and he's like, "Really?"
No, and you know who it was. And again, I don't want to get carried away. I really lost a lot of respect for Max Domi. It was Max Domi that did it.
Oh, chirped him, eh?
Yeah, but Max Domi, that year that Smith here in Ottawa got waived. And do you remember in the preseason, they got into a fight, and he was yelling waivers at him. I was like, okay, man. And then he's had a series here and that was exactly who was doing it. And I just wanted Bennett to grab a hold of him and just wail on him, because it was like, whatever, man. And then this is also coming from another bald man. I was really offended by that.
You were hurt. You were hurt.
Exactly.
Bald guys matter, right? You guys matter.
All goalies, Craig Anderson, Alex Auld.
Yeah.
It's the whole group of you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's from wearing the mask. That's what I love when people come up with that. Did you wear a hat a lot as a kid? I think there might be a tad more to it than that, but hey, gotta work with what you got. Maybe I'll head to Turkey over the summer and do a nice little growth on the front.
To Turkey? Is that how they rock? Is that what they do in Turkey?
Well, they do it in Turkey and Lebanon, and the joke is is that everybody coming back is wrapped up in Band-Aids. The whole flight back from Istanbul to Toronto is full of Canadian men that have gotten hair transplants. It's like $400. It's sheep hair, but it's still. Or actually, I'd go with the goat. I'd go with the goat. Hey, and here's one Yorkie I'll say, and he was ahead of his time. Unfortunately, it wasn't good. Poor Robbie Brown was one of the first to get the hair transplant.
Oh boy!
Oh yeah, Bobby Hall actually. Do you remember Bobby Hall?
Well, I don't really. And then the other thing that happened, that happened in Minnesota is I don't know if Cy Sperling lived there, but there was a small point where the entire Minnesota North Stars hockey team had hair pieces.
Yeah. I think Bellows used to get. There's a clip too of Bellows getting chirped by the New York Islanders bench for, hey, nice rug, Bellows.
John Casey. You had a whole bunch.
Did you hear the story? I think was Casey in St. Louis for a bit.
Yeah.
Okay,
because the famous Brett Hull goal is on John Casey, is it not? The Yzerman off the bar.
So there's one of my buddies was in St. Louis, and he said they had won a game, and everybody skates out and they're patting the goalies. And Casey had his helmet off, and I guess one of the guys was rubbing his head, and his rug fell off, and it was lying on the ice, and he's scrambling to pick up his rug. Can you imagine the horror?
The only thing worse than the rug coming off is when they try to place it back on their head.
How's that look? Oh, it looks great.
That was where I not that he had the rug, but I used to love the clips of Mark Messier when they won the cup. He wouldn't take his helmet off. He'd have the Winwell helmet on. I'm like, what's going on here? This is back to Pee Wee hockey. We win the championship. You throw your helmet up in the air. There he is, presented with the cup. He's got his helmet on. He looked so much better when he trimmed her down too. I don't know what took him so long. Like he's got the perfect head for the baldness. Hey,
it fits.
Anyway, there's a great story written by WHA ref about the fight the night Bobby Hall got into a fight and a guy pulled his hair plugs out and there's just blood everywhere. Anyway, it's wild to listen.
I met him at the Pure Later Cup years ago in Gloucester, and he had some. That was no longer plugs. That was a live animal.
Okay, so. All right, so let's move on.
Why do you wear that rug? That's like the scene out of Slapshot.
Oh, absolutely. One of our old marketing guys in Washington, I used to do a post-game interview with one of the players, and I think we were playing the Rangers, and the fans were yelling at me and screaming, and the gentleman that was kind of trying to protect, he's like, why don't you just go away? I'll never forget it. There's a whole crowd, and the guy looks down, he goes, nice rug, buddy. And everybody just scrambled like mice. It was like... There was no comeback, nothing. Everyone just headed for the locker room. It was like we all had to hydrate after that.
Oh, so good.
There's a new idea coming for the show if Simmer comes back, and that is brought to you by Eric, who says Wally needs a buzzer. Just basically.
We might have to do the Donald Trump mute. We might have to just you'd like the show on ESPN. You get muted for a little bit.
Oh yes. Okay. So we're gonna have to get through some of these names. I'm skipping over Dylan DeMello. We've talked about him enough.
Yeah,
I will say he was second in the NHL in plus minus this year. He is career high in assists and points. There's no question Dylan DeMello will be a perfect fit.
Yeah.
I'm also going to skip Brendan Montour, who we've talked about a lot. Unless you guys have a really big
he's not going anywhere. They're re-signing him.
Well, what a find! Another guy. Talk about a find, right? I mean, one of the most underrated defensemen in the National Hockey League. And again, realistically, is he going anywhere? And then from a price tag standpoint, you're talking about Sanderson, Shabbat on dollars out the door is 10 million defenseman. You're not looking. That's not even on your radar. And go back to just a quick thing on Dylan DeMello, guys. And again, where does he fit? How does he play? This is also from an Ottawa Senators perspective. Be realistic about what you're bringing in. And he did have time with Shabbat. He is a compliment to that. That may be what, at the end of the day, you end up settling on versus some of these other big name players. Is that realistic? And again, if that's what you can do, and if that's able to settle Shabbat a little bit, turn his game around, it's a worthy investment. They have not invested in protecting a $10 million, $8 million cap hit, $10 million defenseman. Yep. It's real important that they identify that this summer, not just bringing in another defenseman.
Montour would be imagine that we start all over again of trying to figure out how to get Montour. We got now, how do we get him on the power play? We got Shabbat, we got Sanderson, we got Montour. Oh shit. It starts all over again. Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Question, but here's another thing about those guys. When you talk about like Will Carrier or Brandon Montour, guys with no state tax, you're gonna have to pay a whole lot more than they're being paid now to get them
ways
to come.
around it. There's
I
ways
understand, but like Brandon Montour at 3.5 million in Florida is a lot higher in Canada.
He's going to get as a free agent though. We're talking $6, $7, $8 million,
yes.
and then at the same time, guys, like Meth is so honest about everything he talks about in a sense of, okay, I could live in Dallas, I can live in Florida. I don't care if Canada has no state tax and I'm making more money. It's not a level playing field to start with, realistically, for a lot of players. And you just want to be honest. And here's the other thing that you're going to, Yorkie, you know this. If you're going to start dealing with older players, you're dealing with married players generally. And married players is a whole different ballgame of where they're going, because obviously who has a lot of say in where you're going to end up playing? The wife does. Yep. And that's so that right there is a completely different ballgame than the young single guy that's drafted by a team and doesn't know any better. And he loves it. That's what the Edmonton Oilers were built on and won cups. Those guys didn't know any better. Now, as they got older, what'd they do? They all ended up signing with the New York Rangers. But initially, if you're bringing these players in, it's going to be real hard. And that's where I think soft deals from an Ottawa perspective are probably going to be a little bit more realistic. Or on a case of Dylan DeMello, who has been here, seemed to like it, has played in Winnipeg, seemed to like it. You know, is that realistic that you can circle back on a player like that?
Okay. Brady Shea, Carolina. Carolina's got some decisions to make. They've got a few UFAs. Brady Shea, 6'3", 210. He's led all Sens defensemen in scoring with 47 points this year, setting a new career high for points in a season with Brady Shea. So plays 20 minutes a night. Is he a viable option for you, Yorkie?
No.
And the only issue is you put him on the list. He shoots left.
No, I didn't put him on he wasn't on my list. He's a really, really good defenseman. But in a perfect world, I'm taking Brett Pesce all day long. To me, he's too similar to what you already have. He's a puck moving, skating defenseman. He can defend, but I don't want to go back into that whole left shot thing. I like, and if you watch how the NHL is played now, the defensemen are always wide in the offensive zone because they call this relieving the pressure. So a lot of teams do that now. They do automatic rims around the boards, and the D are waiting there to really. He's a release valve. Mm-hmm. When you're on your right side, those plays are way easier to do. Everyone clogs up the middle as well. So the middle of the ice is always in the neutral zone clogged up. If your stick's on the middle and you're a lefty, when you go D to D, it's really hard to go D to D and hit that far forward. So for me, I love right side, left side. And I think in today's NHL, it's even more important. So I don't want Shea because I don't want another left shot defenseman, even though he's still a good player.
Well,
yeah, I totally agree on that.
Simmer. It was on some list.
Well, no, exactly. I was just going through and looking at defensemen and having the discussion, but on that, and this is where when the Chychrun trade was made. I mean, again, if you know, and I've seen a guy for years as a left shot be very successful as a right defenseman, okay, I'm all over it. But this experiment, like, I'm going to volunteer to end up playing the right side, that's great. Neither Shabbat or Chychrun handling the forecheck, coming out under pressure, Yorkie. And as you said, unless you're Chris Chelios and you're switching hands to hold the puck in, then forget it. But no, at the end of the day, and that's where, as I said, this idea that you bring in another guy, what does Jacob Chychrun end up being? He ends up being your third left defenseman. You know, you can't end up doing that. And that's where, as I said, if Thomas Chabot, to me, is properly coached, I still have a lot of faith in him. Not to mention, I don't think he's going anywhere. You don't have to. You shouldn't have to find the sexiest player out there. You should be able to bring in somebody and find a fit. I go back to Ron Hainsey playing with Morgan Riley at the end of his career. He came in, and it was just simple. It was smart. And as you said, it was reliable. That's what Thomas Chabot needs right now. And to the point on Brady Shea, and I'll also go back from a pro scouting standpoint, I'm always curious when a team trades a good young defenseman even for a first-round pick. Because one hand I say, well, if he's that good, why do you ever trade him? Carolina gave up a first-round pick. That was pretty good identification. And then you say to yourself, it was like for years with Anaheim where they said, they've got all these great defensemen. Well, the only great defenseman they ended up having out of that whole group was Theodore. And they ended up letting him go, and he's just been a rock and rolling in Vegas. So identification, but again, absolutely has to be a right shot for Thomas Chabot, and you don't have to blow the bank financially.
Let's go to Brent Pesce, who's in Carolina.
Yeah, love him. from what I hear, and listen, I don't know Brett Pesce from a hole in the wall, but he seems to be a guy that's going to take a little bit of a discount to stay there. But I think he's going to get a huge dollar amount. To me, this guy is exactly what Ottawa needs. 6'3", tons of experience, right shot, can defend, plays 20 minutes a night. And the great thing about him, he's not a power play guy. He's going to come in here and just move the puck, play defense, and be super dependable. I just think it's going to be, to me, he's the most attractive right shot D on the market right now. And there is going to be a lot. There's going to be a lineup for this guy. Well, who else is out there that's a right shot D? That I know Montour, but he's not going anywhere. He's Florida's number one.
We have a
defenseman.
list of them, Yorkie. We also got Tyler Myers on the list, or Chris Tanev, or
the scary thing with those guys, and I love Tanev as a player. They're approaching mid-30s. Pesce, if you decide to go a little longer on the contract, it doesn't scare me just because of his age. I know he was injured, but it was just a little crack on the ankle there as a bottom of the leg break. That's not a serious injury. I'm telling you, this guy's going to make a lot of money this summer.
Yorkie, and again, people that identified in hockey, absolutely. And here's the other thing, and I know, Wally, you mentioned his hit totals. I don't know what Jake Sanderson's hit totals are. I'm not following the stats. Here's what Jake Sanderson does, and we'll go back to Nick Lidstrom. They separate people from the puck, and whether you consider that a hit or not, technically, what would be more important for me? Now, I'm not expecting, I'm not talking about being Jacob Trouba, but the whole part of hockey is actually having the puck. And do I want physical defensemen? Absolutely. What he does, like Lidstrom, like Jake Sanderson, he separates people from the puck. He doesn't necessarily make contact, but he's a big body. He doesn't have to. He's so bloody smart. And you want to talk about a dream compliment for Thomas Chabot? This is the dream player. Now, American, played his full career in Carolina, 9 years. Is he coming to Ottawa? I mean, you better roll out something. It would be, and this would also be, you would have to pay him so much money in term that he couldn't turn it down. And then does he honestly want to be here? So as I said, I don't think that's very realistic because, hey, he'll probably go back to Carolina and say, listen, I'll take a little discount. Here's what I'm being offered. But as far as teams around the National Hockey League, I mean, he's a stud. He's a stud defenseman that, as I said, sometimes you don't have to notice a guy's Wally. You know what I mean? Sometimes you go to games and doesn't have to be a huge hit. Doesn't have to be running a power play. Sometimes, exactly. And then go back to Lidstrom, go back to Jake Sanderson. Sometimes just smart defenseman. The best thing he did all night was, wow, didn't even notice him, but man, did he play a hell of a game.
It's
Jake
Carolina,
Sanderson, 49 hits, by the way.
Yeah. Well, same with, if you watch Jacob Slavin play, he doesn't hit anybody. He takes the puck away. It's body position. It's having a good stick. During the regular season, there's no hitting. There's very little hitting. Playoffs, totally different animal. You want these D. What did Luke? We had Luke on the other day. Every single team is looking for big, long defensemen with reach, can skate, move the puck. If you took Brett Pesce, that's his scouting report. Right there.
Yeah. Right there. And I'm not saying it changes the identity of the player, but I'm also very leery of the stats guys when it comes to hits as well. I just think of my buddy Brendan Witt when he played with the Islanders. I think he had 3,000 hits. Like the Islanders was the most ridiculous. And as I said, 49 Wally. I'm not going to pretend like all of a sudden he's, like I said, out there being Scott Stevens. But some of these stats and how important is it? I mean, European brand hockey, I always say is a mentality thing. What do they say? And this is where they laugh at Canadians on the 200-foot ice. Guy would run down on the forecheck, Wendell Clark or Lindros, and they'd run the guy over, and they'd kind of look at you like, listen, the play's already to the other end. You've wasted all this energy coming and trying. You didn't even separate me from the puck. But Europeans play through the hands. They play smart. And the whole idea, and come playoff time, is winning puck battles and possessing the puck. And that's all you said. We go back to the St. Louis defense. You go back to Vegas's defense yesterday or last year. Nothing sexy, just big bodies. Wear you down in long playoffs, separate you from the puck, make it look easy, and then you just move on.
I'm skipping Tyler Myers on the list. One, he played a career low this year, but I think he's too expensive. I also say this. The only other thing, guys, a little point on Tanev and Myers. You've got Green. We had him for a couple of years in Vancouver. So you've got the intel right there. You've got the feel. And so hey, they're going to be more than. Is it realistic? How would he fit? And the whole identification that I'm asking myself is,
who would fit with Thomas Chabot. And if a player is a little bit older for the short term, again, these are some of the things being realistic about Ottawa. We can talk about all the great players and all the big names. Yeah. What would be a fit for Thomas Chabot and what's realistic? And you might have to, and again, I go back to Hainsey in Toronto. You might have to bite the bullet a little bit if you want to, but you have to solidify that. First of all, the right side D is not strong enough after Zub. In my estimation, they're not good enough. And at the same time, I've got to find someone to help my $10 million defenseman in Thomas Chabot.
I just think Tyler Myers makes $6 million. Is he going to take a pay cut?
Yeah.
So here's a guy. All right, go ahead, Yorkie, and then I have a guy.
No, finish your thought.
Well, I want to move on to another player. So if you want to talk,
okay, I would just say last thing on Myers, he'd look good in your bottom pairing. You got those two towers if you decide to bring. If Clevin has a great summer, imagine those two monsters in your third pairing. Be a pretty good mentor for Clevin too.
Yeah, and I'll give Myers credit because he got booed out of Buffalo because he's also, I'll say, a bit of a Bouwmeester effect, and he's not as big a body. He's not the same player, but I'll tell you what. Playing in Winnipeg, kind of got riled out of there. Winnipeg or Vancouver fans not easy on him. I don't know if he'd want to sign up with Ottawa because he's always going to be faced with. He's not a hard player. He's a big body. People don't appreciate what he can do, and they're always expecting him to run people through the boards. And when he signed that ridiculous contract in Buffalo, it's basically what Darnell Nurse is going through the same thing right now. You know what I mean? He looks so scared on the ice right now. Doesn't want the puck. Doesn't want to do anything. That contract, and we had Thomas Caberlet in Toronto. Was funny, Yorkie, because he went to Fergie and he said, "Listen, I want a good contract, but I don't want a contract where the fans are going to be all over me." Well, they saved that for McCabe. But he didn't want to be just too far up where all of a sudden people were going to be on him and identifying him. And that's in Canada, man, if you want to take the big bucks, that's awesome, but you better deliver.
Well, okay. That's what happened to Wade Redden. Reds took it. He had the big contract. Philly is making quite a bit less. Who'd the fans get on?
Yeah. And also you lost Char.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Who's next, Wally?
That's a whole other story. Okay. Dallas. Yanni Hakanpää.
Is he even playing in the playoffs?
Is this a real person? Because I'm putting this all on Yorkie. I tried to do, and what was the Hakan Locken that the Sens ended up with a few years ago? This guy sounds like a reindeer farmer somewhere.
Are you talking Yuri Jokipaka?
Oh yeah. But this guy sounds like he herds reindeer in northern Finland. Listen. And so this one's on you. I don't know anything about
He's too old. He's like 30. The guy.
Wait a second. He's 32, and you were like, "Well, that's Brandon Montour's 33."
Yeah, but
he's a seasoned veteran.
But Montour's this guy isn't even established in the league yet. Like he's a player.
Listen, you're not going to get the first line player every time to play on the Ottawa Senators. You're going to have to do some smart decision making here and identify a player. 6'5", 218.
Ooh.
Led the Stars in hits. Was third in block shots this season. Played 18 minutes a night.
How many games has he played in the playoffs so far?
By the way, here we go. How many games has Brady Tkachuk played in the playoffs?
No, but is he dressing for the Dallas Stars in the playoffs?
No, I think that's what he meant. Well, eligible for the actual playoffs, how much is he playing versus as his teammate? That's like Ryan O'Reilly. I thought he was totally cursed you go from Colorado, you go to Buffalo, and you say to yourself, okay, does this follow this guy around? And then you get to St. Louis there in last place, and you're like, oh my God, this guy is either not very good or he has the worst luck possible. Well, what happens? They make the playoffs, wins the cup, wins the Conn Smythe. Again, I find the whole playoff and Stanley Cup thing, and I think back to like a Dale Hunter. Okay, he didn't win a Stanley Cup. Like, who cares? At the end of the day, there's nothing more he could have done in his career. So, but as far as a fella, and this is also, I don't know the player guys. But this is when you do have good pro scouting. There may be a defenseman out there that Dave Poulin or the staff or Staios or somebody identifies and says, listen, this isn't going to get our fan base all fired up and people aren't going to be, talking about a guy like Pesce, but this is where we identify the right player. And in the United States, it's so much easier to do that because they have no idea who the players are. So you just tell them that he's good. In Canada here, we got to break it down all the time. But like I said, that's realistically where I think Ottawa's at, maybe in identifying the defenseman, but also as you talk about Yorkie on some of the foot soldiers.
Yeah. I don't know the player that well either. He plays in Dallas. I'm just looking at his stats. He's big. He's playing on it is a good thing if you're on a really good team, even though you're not dressed, you're going through the playoff experience. He did play a little bit with Carolina in the playoffs before, and has played with Dallas in the playoffs. So yeah, who knows? Maybe he could be a guy that comes in your third pairing. But I'd be lying if I said I knew anything about this guy. But he's big. He's big.
Okay.
Now I'm having flashbacks of Sammy Hellenius when he played. He was big too.
I like big and can move. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
there's a reason this guy hasn't.
But you have $12 million in cap space right now. You need to figure out what you're going to pay Shane Pinto.
Yeah. That's a whole.
And by the way, I'm told that those talks aren't very close.
Probably they're never close at this time because.
Well, so remember they were trying to get something done before the World Championships, which I thought was really weird because it always goes late into the year, especially with RFAs. They're apparently worlds apart.
Yeah, I thought with Shane Pinto, first of all, and I loved his dad. And when we'd have him on with JR, I thought he was incredibly confident and at the same time a great kid. So what happens last year is that he ends up being suspended for the first half of the year. As he rolls back in town, he loves you. He's thrilled that he's back. It's like, oh my God, I missed you guys. And then he plays the year and realizes he's a pretty good player, goes and has a great World Championships. Now you call him up. He's like, show me the money. And then the other part you're running into quite simply right now, players can't compare themselves to other contracts, but you did set a bar back with Colin White, which was ridiculous. But you're also looking at, he sees a situation here where, okay, what's your plan B? What's your plan B here? You got Norris, where you have no idea where he's going to fit, where he's going to play. Ridley Gregg isn't even close to being a second-line center. You got Stützle, you got me. And I think, and this is the other part, we'd have Dave Poulin on every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. From the time he was in North Dakota to the time he got here, he loved him. He talked about him. He sees himself. He sees himself in Shane Pinto. And I just think the Pinto camp realizes, listen, and I said this before, and this is before all the injuries, I did think he had a ceiling that at some point could pass Norris just because his physical attributes are Yorkie. And I think he's looking even more and realizing, listen, I'm going to be a second line center here. If you don't want to at least pay me, and I don't know if the 6 years times 5 or was it 5 times 6, whatever was thrown out there, I would, if I was Ottawa, would have done that in a heartbeat. Because here's a few things. First of all, I think the upside of the player is there. I don't think he's a third line center. People love to throw. I don't think Ridley Gregg's a third line player either. I think as he fills out, he's going to move up in your lineup. And in the case of Pinto, it's insurance, guys. Like I said, you have no idea what you're doing with Norris. Pinto is a major key to solidify that center ice going forward. And I do think if you're able to get not a crazy contract, but something pretty good in place, I'm pretty confident as I get to the second half of that deal that he's going to be more than worth the money versus, jumping the gun and giving a guy like Norris $8 million a year.
Hey, Wally, I've said this before. I've seen Pinto off the ice, had a couple of conversations with him. I'm surprised. Like, he's deceivingly a big guy.
Yes.
He's all of 6'2". He's a right shot. And I think he's got the smartest hockey acumen of all of Ottawa. Stützle's got the offense, but as far as Patrice Bergeron mold of that center that understands how to play, understands the clock of when to make plays, when not to make plays, I think it's unquestioned that Pinto's your smartest centerman.
I'd also say, guys, big picture, and you got to get away from it right now where Ottawa's at. But I was never sold on a Stützle Norris realistically if you got to a playoff. I don't think that there's enough size, enough meat. And that's where I also thought that Pinto should be the complement. In a perfect world, taking all your key faceoffs, is a big body. And then the other thing, you look at his baseball background, where he started in hockey, I think there's a tremendous ceiling, but he's also a tremendous athlete. And again, I also like the fact that he has a lot of confidence. So, like I said, from an Ottawa perspective, I hate this because we went through this with Brady Tkachuk for months and months. It's just one of those situations where Ottawa's in a bit of a spot. But if it's not crazy money, I don't like the bridge deal on him. I try to get some term. And like I said, anywhere between 5 and 6, if that's realistic, personally, if I'm Ottawa, I'd get that done in a heartbeat.
Yeah. No, he checks all the boxes.
But Simmer, I'm going to ask you this question because we talked about it in the show before. You said Gregg is arguably a second-line player, which I can appreciate. But if the Ottawa Senators could roll out Stützle, Pinto, Gregg down the middle, are you not a better hockey team? Like, are you now closer to a playoff team if Gregg is a third-line center?
No, for sure, Wally. All I point out is that, again, we like to kind of put these players in. And when you go back to, and it's a pretty good one, it wasn't the best tournament in the world. Hey, I know it was all about Connor Bedard. When you ask Dave Cameron, what did he say when they lost Ridley Gregg at the World Junior? He's been our best player. He was outstanding. Now he's a slight guy, but he's going to take some time to mature. What I also just see is because he likes to muck a little bit, would I move him around? I'm not disagreeing with it. You're in a better spot. All I'm saying is that people look at him, there's an upside. You know what I mean? Some guys come in and you just say, hey, that guy's going to be a prototypical fourth line player. He's going to be a prototypical third line player. He's got a top six ceiling, how he's used, where he's used. And here's another part. You may get to a spot next year where Norris isn't available. Do you want to slide him up to that? And if you go and get some other foot soldiers for the third line, would he be a complement on the second line to a Pinto and a Giroux or a Pinto and a Batherson? All I'm saying on him is he's not a third line player. He's got tremendous upside. And, unfortunately, Yorkie, he is a little bit on the lighter side, but as he matures, he's exactly what Ottawa is missing. Like, he is an excellent player and he's a pain in the ass to play against. It's just the unfortunate part is he's not going to do much physical damage on anybody.
What I like about Greg is the will. He's got that internal will of competition inside him, which is really great. But Wally, we've been we're going pretty late here. Which we remind. I know we have some other things, but we
have a tea time.
I've got my Monday physio, but we've got to throw. We've got to throw this important question to Simmer.
Okay.
Before the show's over. And Gavin, this is a little pop culture here. Wally's had a tough day today. He hasn't got to say a lot, so the steam's been coming out his ears. So you're a movie guy. I know you're a movie guy. So of these three fictional movie characters, which one reminds you of Salty Wally the best? You've got Walter Hobbs from Elf. You've got Neil Page from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and then you have Dr. Leo Marvin from What About Bob?
Was that Richard Dreyfuss?
That was a salty Richard Dreyfuss.
One of the most underrated movies, and I think that was that not filmed at Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire?
Right.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
That underrated actors, Richard Dreyfuss, but got to be honest with you, and this is unfortunate, but Walter Hobbs. Absolutely. Like poor Elf, like no identification of the fact that that's your dad. Richard Dreyfuss, I gotta be honest with you, if I had to room with John Candy and sleep in the same bed and hang out with him, I might be salty. The Hobbs guy, the Hobbs guy, just he had salty going all the way.
Oh yeah. Wally does look a little bit like Steve Martin with the hair from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It just but my personal favorite. I love Dr. Leo Marvin from What About Bob?
That was, oh my God, and the wife, I remember that. And here's the other part, and I wouldn't rule out though, Yorkie, of all the years that Wally traveled, I could see that performance at the rental car desk having occurred at some point in all of his travels. And Mr. Joy, the cameraman, was probably right behind him. And Wally was losing it because he had been out to the lot twice and his Cadillac wasn't there. They had a small, not even a mid-size. They had a small for him, and it wasn't even in the spot. And he wasn't even on the board at the Hertz board. Mr. Wallace wasn't even on there as a gold member.
There is slight truth to some of that, but I usually let Dave Joy deal with the rental car because it just got frustrating after a while. All right,
we got to.
I've never seen What About Bob, by the way.
Right, one of the best under the radar comedies of all time, Simmer. What About Bob?
And here's the other thing with Richard Dreyfuss. First of all, I think started out in the shark movie Jaws. Other one very underrated with Richard Dreyfuss in it was called Tin Men. That was where they went around and sold aluminum siding in Baltimore. Another real good movie, but he doesn't get enough love. He just kind of disappeared. But What About Bob is Lake Winnipesaukee, and it's a vintage Bill Murray as well.
Yeah. My parents owned a timeshare condo on Lake Winnipesaukee.
Oh, that's I guess, would you call that our version of the Big Rito? That's a big deal there. My old buddy Ace Bailey, his buddy had a cottage there, and poor Ace, rest in peace, greatest guy ever, greatest scout. But the guy owned a cottage there, and Ace used to go up to the cottage all the time, to the point that people thought Ace owned the cottage. So on the weekends, Ace would be inviting everybody over, and everybody thought they'd own. But that's where I think my buddy, the Leach guy, a lot of hockey guys, that's prime territory if you got a cottage.
All right, moving on. Finally,
okay.
Betway,
we talk a little. We got to talk. Are we talked to Ullmark already?
Yeah. Listen. Okay. It's all your fault if we don't get to all the topics, basically. So that's.
Okay. I got an appointment at 10:30. I gotta be there in 5 minutes.
I didn't make the little arts and crafts thing that you just posted.
Well, that was the highlight of the show. That was the highlight.
that was weekend production quality right there by York.
Right there.
I don't even know when you had time to do that. Okay. Lock of the day brought to you by Betway. Please play responsibly. It must be 19 plus. The Dallas Stars, Edmonton Oilers. The series switches into Edmonton tonight for Game 3. Gentlemen, I need your picks.
I am going with the Edmonton Oilers because I've got 8 Oilers in my pool and I need them to win.
I'll end up going with the same guys. I do think, first of all, satisfied with the split. They do look a little bit tired. The part that's always been right in the back of my mind, and I give credit, I thought Skinner, although not tested in Game 7, as a goaltender like myself who played nervous hockey and was god-awful, I was really worried about him. I've actually thought he's elevated in this series, guys, where I'm actually trusting him a little bit more. And that's really with the Edmonton Oilers. I'm confident that if Skinner is able to, and I remember John Van Beesbroek saying that to me, sometimes it's easier to play on the road, but I feel like he's got some confidence. I feel like with the crowd, and I feel like just overall. So I'm going to take Edmonton as well, Wally.
I will take the Dallas Stars. I still think that they're, I don't know if the emotional switch back to Edmonton will matter, but I just like Dallas in this series, so I'm sticking with the Stars.
Why don't we take a break, have lunch, come back, finish things up?
Let's start doing our picks for next year. We'll start doing our playoff. We'll go draft, we'll go free agency, and then we'll start doing a power ranking of the top 32 teams in the National Hockey League.
I still got a whole other page of the Nerd Report we got to get to. All right, gentlemen, let's do it again soon. Simmer, great to have you back.
Yeah, nice Simmer, great chatting with you, buddy. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and guys, honestly, thank you. I haven't been around much, and to break back in to do a little bit of media, it's honestly good for the soul. I was super pumped yesterday, and a lot of fun. And let's be honest, if an hour and a half can go that quickly, you're having some fun. And so have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.
And you'll get out of the witness protection program soon from that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cheers, boys.
See you guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to Coming In Hot. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.